maybe I'll start a bit with Foresight Institute. We are a nonprofit. We're based in the Bay Area, and we support early-stage AI, bio, neuro, nanotechnologies, like really frontier science and tech that doesn't otherwise get funded. We do so through a few million in grants and prizes each year, fellowships, workshops, you name it. I think one thing that's interesting for the community here is that since the early days, we've had a pretty big overlap with the cypherpunk mailing list and also with the early extropians, who some of you might be familiar with. So this is from a 1995 Extropy magazine, which was the magazine for the early extropians. And you have Eric Drexler, the third from the left, who was one of our co-founders, predicting on the future of technologies. And then you have people like Nick Szabo, for example, all the way on the right, who many people here are probably familiar with. And I think what's interesting about, if you look at these old predictions from back in the day, is that A, people were really optimistic about the date of arrival of science and tech that we all want. And then B, I think they had this pretty decentralized, sovereign, like human freedom and privacy and empowerment approach to the way that science and tech should be developed. And now fast forward to today, and I think if you look in many of the AI circles, if you think about the kind of like evolution of AI that like many people I think are thinking is most likely but also most desirable, is something like centralized AI. This is hyper stylized, but something like a world government or a megacorp or an AGI singleton that ensures ultimate civilizational safety via surveillance and control, right? That's literally what I think some people here in the AI safety space are, I think, favoring in terms of a safety advancing approach to AI. Now, many people here know a bunch of these challenges. I'm not going to go into them, but the ultimate one, and the one that's most obvious, is probably like loss of freedom and privacy, right? That's what many people here care about a lot, and that's obviously lost in a centralized AI paradigm. I think another really interesting one is a bit more subtle, and that's stagnation and value lock-in. And so once you have a centralized system, it's pretty unlikely to be aligned with the evolution of science and our cultural systems the way that we have it. I think one that's really often kind of like underemphasized is the single point of failure. And so imagine you had like one megacorp shilling out AI to everyone. A big risk for that might be accidents. You might have risks of corruption, especially if it was a government, a world government that was administering an AI system. And then you have attack, right? If you have one central mechanism of control for AI, that's a pretty attractive target to attack. So I'm not going to tell you anything new here on this slide, but many people here are at this conference because you kind of like see a different world of AI that is at least possible, right? So this is from Ilya. He once said something like, an alternative solution to close centralized players and enable a future where super powerful AI truly benefits users and communities, drives new economies, accelerates innovation and creativity. All the different projects that you are building are a part of this worldview, I would say. And then I think the literal slogan of NearCon is something like intelligent systems run private, open, and on your terms, right? That's this other world that is like slowly emerging, but quite slowly, but it is emerging. So the benefits, many of you here know. So again, not going to go into them much, but obviously great for freedom and privacy, better for evolution and progress. And I think crucially, also in terms of single points of failure, instead of that, you might have this network in which this intelligence gets distributed that is a lot more resilient to attacks, to bugs, and to internal corruption than if you administer AI centrally. Now, I think many of you here have known most of the stuff until now in the presentation, but I think if we're interested in building decentralized systems, we have to also think about some of the challenges involved in these systems. And I think we actually can't be Pollyannish about those. I think we should address them and should address them through technology in the systems that we're building day to day. So the biggest one is the reason why many people favor in the AI policy communities like a more closed approach to AI in the first place, which is the risk of open proliferation of technology risk, right? Like, for example, AI-enabled biorisk is a big reason that why many people, for example, fear an open release of models that are super capable, right? So that's a really big risk, and I think we should contend to it. If we want to build in an open, decentralized, privacy-preserving way, we need to address the fact that there's going to be proliferation of technology risks. Second one, I think decentralized systems always have this feature that they're kind of unstable against centralization risks, right? Like even in a decentralized network, it will always be a little bit more economical for one entity to create a monopoly, to centralize power, to leverage economies of scale. And that will always be a problem for as long as we will have decentralized systems. Sometimes it's more of a problem, sometimes less. More poles are definitely better in a multipolar system. And then lastly, collective action problems, right? If we want to solve many of the big challenges that we care about in civilization, we need to have some approach in which we can coordinate in a decentralized way, and that's sometimes harder. Now, I want to go through 3 examples of projects that are already building out in the open or of research that's actually being done that addresses some of these challenges and that are decentralized systems that I think we should be building more of, just to like spark your imagination of like stuff that we should be building in that decentralized sovereign AI space. So the first one, of course, there's benefits and risk for decentralized and centralized systems. And so I want to talk about decentralized systems and how they can be built with some of the risks in mind. So I don't know if anyone here has ever come across SEL4. Okay, well, then that's news, but this is a provably secure microkernel. And it's really interesting because it was one of the only systems that when it got implemented in an autonomous systems withstood also a DARPA red teaming attack. And so why is this cool? It's because it combines verification with red teaming. And so this is this general notion of defense as like defense in depth. So you basically want to, when you're defending against the proliferation of technology risks, for example, whether it's cyber or whether it's bio, you don't just want to use one defense strategy, but instead you want to really like layer different defense strategies on top. So for example, here it's verification, but it's also red teaming, so that you can like account for the weaknesses of each defensive layer that you're building. And so I think as we're building some of the decentralized stack that many of you are working on, I think we should create these redundancies and we should really have some of these gaps in place and take inspiration from a defense in-depth approach for some of the other like technologies that we're building too. The second risk that I mentioned for decentralized systems is the centralization risk, right? Like that for each individual and in each ecosystem, there might always be a bit of a moat for centralized agents. So for example, here, the big example is today is AI giants. They compound power mostly through data modes. And so every user interaction makes their models better and their lock-in deeper. And I think an interesting example to the contrary is Near's DCML. And I think that's pretty interesting because it runs AI inside of these Ts, where even Near itself can't really see user data. And I think that's a really interesting new approach of doing things because it's really structurally preventing any provider from seeing data and so from preventing them also from building the ultimate data mode that would then lead to further centralization of individual providers, while you as a user still have the full benefit of using a really powerful model and of doing all the things that you might want to do as a user. So I think it's actually a really amazing example of like building systems that can actually compensate for some of the centralization pressures that we're worried about in the system that we're using today. Okay, last one, the collective action problems. This one is a bit harder, but this is a paper, and I've like used it a bit in terms of giving us inspiration for the types of systems we could be building. So in this paper, people basically built these open source agents that can actually read and verify each other's codes. And so if I want to collaborate with one of you guys, I can't look in your head and see whether you're going to defect or not. But these open source systems can to some extent. So they can actually check beforehand whether how another agent will behave towards a request for collaboration. And so through these types of mechanisms, by having these open source mechanisms and this verifiability, you can create new institutions that are a lot more collaborative. And so maybe even some of the collective action problems that usually decentralized systems find it much harder to solve, we can solve through better AI systems that can like search for different collaboration partners, negotiate, and then actually like enforce commitments, lowering all the bargaining costs that we know about in economics. So those are just 3 examples of how we can address some of these challenges. I'm mostly using those as examples to give you inspiration of the types of structures and systems that I think we should be building if we're interested in a decentralized world model, because we need to build with some of the risks in mind if we want these futures to go well. If you're interested in working on this stuff or you are already working on it, we are really interested in supporting you. So we we launched a new project for our 40th anniversary this year. And so we offer grants in decentralized AI for security, privacy, and some open science. It's a few $1 million per year. And in addition to the grants, we also offer these headquarters, one in Berlin and one in the Bay Area, where we are going to like collect folks. We're going to support you a lot more, connect you with a bunch of mentors, have some kind of community where you can really like build along mission-aligned people, because there aren't many people that want to build in a decentralized way. I guess there's many here, but overall not that much. And then we also have a local and private compute cluster that we're currently building out for those of you who really want to build in a sovereign compute fashion. We would love for you to come and tinker with the compute that we're setting up. I'm mostly saying this because we're interested in supporting you, whether that is by you, receiving support, grant funding, et cetera, from our node here in the Bay or in Berlin. But also, if you're interested in starting your own node, I would really, really be interested in talking to you, because ultimately, I think if we want decentralized approaches, like many of the stuff that people at NEAR are interested in, to really like flourish, we need to create these different nodes I think even locally spread around the world, where people can flock to as Schelling points when they want to do things differently. If they don't want to build in academia, if they don't want to build within the constraints of a company, they want to build open source, they want to build local, they want to build private sovereign AI systems, they need some kind of community and a Schelling point that has incentive mechanisms like grants to be able to do that with. So if you're interested in setting another one up, we have some seed funding for that available too. But in general, I'm just encouraging you guys to build more of what you're building, build with some of the risks in mind, and if you're interested in getting more support and connecting to a community of like minds, I'm super interested in talking to you. Thank you very much. That's it.